Howdy YouTube, this is Charles
and John
and Princess Frostbite bringing you another episode of our tiny cabin project. Today we're going to talk about something that a lot of you have asked about in the comments.
And that's going to be what happened and why our cabin was shot up.
It's kind of a interesting story, so stay tuned and we hope you enjoy the show. Again, we're going to talk to you today about the circumstances behind our cabin getting shot up. Some people have asked in the comments on some of our previous videos about what had happened, and we only briefly went into discussing what had happened. So we decided to go ahead and make a video entry about what had happened. And, well, it all started with my doomsday prepper obsession about a year ago. And when you get your bug out bag all done, you stop and realize when the zombie comes,
you don't really have a place to run.
Yeah, so what we decided to do was find some rural property somewhere in Missouri, 2 to 3 hours outside of the city limits of St. Louis. So we ended up finding some property in the Ozarks. We have a little bit of land on top of a small mountain, about 3 hours outside of St. Louis, where we presently live. And, well, basically how I obtained the property is I answered an ad on Craigslist. The guy advertising several hundred acres for sale with an exorbitant amount of money for the price of the land. And I sent him an email saying, would you mind selling some schmuck a little piece of property, a couple acres, just to help live out a doomsday bug out scenario? And he emailed me back and said, yeah, I'll call you tomorrow. And that weekend we went down and signed the deeds on the paper to acquire the property. We were really excited, and you know, we originally had talked about building a cabin on the land. And in the time that we were perusing the internet and YouTube, looking at different videos about off-grid and all that jazz, we ended up stumbling across some of Deke Diedrichson's videos on his tiny houses, micro shelters, tiny cabins, and of course a bunch of other tiny house videos. I had been introduced to the tiny house movement many years ago, but never really had much of a vested interest into it. But changes in modern society, you know, the idea was really interesting, and we figured that we could put a cabin out there, and it was really fueling the desire to get this done sooner than later. I work as an ABA therapist, and I don't make a lot of money, and neither one of us really make a lot of money, so we were on a limited budget, and we weren't really sure how we were going to do this. One day on my lunch break, I was scrolling through the internet, looking at different cabins and stuff, and I found a company that sold cabin kits, and I found a pressure-treated cabin with the barn-style wood look, and it was really inexpensive, and they said they financed. So I called the guy up, got the information, and for $300 down, not only would they finance us the cabin, but also deliver it and level it for free. And that was our biggest thing, was trying to figure out how we were going to get building materials up on top of the mountain. And then also with it being solely off-grid, you know, running power tools and so on and so forth, because, you know, we don't have a lot of money to just go out and buy everything and buy generators and all that stuff right away. We had to build this up slowly. So I called Jonathan up and I tell him about the opportunity for $300 to go ahead and have a cabin delivered.
He couldn't even finish his sentence. When he told me, it was just so awesome of an occasion. I immediately said yes, no hesitations whatsoever. As Charles mentioned, we originally were thinking about how we were going to haul this lumber and materials up there, level ground on top of a mountain where the dirt is only 6 inches deep. It's pretty much impossible. So this opportunity was literally for us the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, it was really going to put things into hyperdrive because we both like to do things like hike in the woods, go fishing. Our property's right on a river. We also have a couple creeks and spring-fed streams in the area. So it was like going to be really nice. We'd also recently bought some kayaks, and we're really getting back into the route of being outdoorsmen. Well, 3 weeks later, fast forward, and we're having our cabin delivered. We've got a couple slideshow videos on here of, the classic tiny house delivery where you're in your truck, behind the truck, with your tiny house on the back of the truck, going up the big hill, and then we got hit with a snowstorm that day. Well, there are 3 other cabins on top of the mountain besides ours. One of which, the guy who lives there is a weekend warrior. He's only up there on the weekend, and his is also a tiny house. There's another tiny cabin, tiny house that was across from ours that was vacant, and then there's a trailer off to the side that's also an off-the-grid trailer. Anyway, the guy who lives in the trailer lives on the mountain. He's there every day. Well, anyway, the day we had the cabin delivered in the snow, wondering if we were even going to make it up the mountain, whether or not the house on the back of the trailer was going to be able to make it around the curves and get there. It was pretty scary. In fact, in the midst of leveling the house, the guy dropped the house one time. No damage was done, but it was, kind of scary watching the house hit the ground and slide 5 feet towards you, where you got, a 9,000-pound building coming sliding at you on top of a blizzard drift. It was exciting. But anyway, the one tiny cabin that was normally vacant had smoke coming out of the stack, and me and John and the guy we bought the property from were kind of like, well, I don't know what's going on there. I thought that building had been vacant for like 10 years. Well, the guy that was staying in that and the guy who resides on the top of the mountain, they came out of their houses and shook our hands, were real cordial, and asked questions about, were we planning to live there and this and that. And the old man was oblivious, but the young guy who was staying in apparently what turned out to be his dad's cabin knew something was up. He was able to figure out that John and I were not cousins. We're not brothers. We're married. And this was the start of an epic journey for us.
Bad and good.
Little did we know. So anyway, we stayed that weekend. We come home, and the cabin was just bare bones. It literally was just the structure. We had planned on doing this. Part of the reason we were able to get the cabin so cheap is we're doing all the interior finishing ourselves, interior walls, wiring, and solar. We're going to do a water rain collection filtrated system for water for like the showers and washing dishes, and probably not for drinking. We have another setup for that.
We'll also be building an add-on onto the porch for the bathroom to expand the square footage of the cabin a little bit.
Yeah, because right now our tiny cabin with the loft is 116 square feet, so we are a true tiny house. It is a micro shelter. It's basically the size of a living room with a loft, and we're making it work. Well, anyway, so the next weekend comes and more snow comes with it. On our way down there, we have the back of the truck loaded up with a bunch of building supplies, and we get all the way down to the mountain. We're trying to go up the mountain, and the snow came in so quick that the ground hadn't had time to freeze. So as we were climbing up the pitch, our wheels were digging down into the snow and hitting mud and just spinning, and we started sliding backwards. We ended up having to turn around and come home. So we didn't go to the cabin that weekend.
Thank God.
So a day or so passes. I'm getting ready to go back to work. I'm about to walk into one of my clients' houses, and my phone rings. And as I'm walking up to the house, I answer the phone and say, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Hey, Charles, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Pretty good. Getting ready to walk into a client's house. What's up?" You know, our concern was the fact that he decided that, you know, they weren't going to go through with the sale of the property because, you know, they just didn't feel right selling to a gay couple because, of course, the guy we bought the property from, we had to disclose our marital status to. We're buying property. He's like, "Well, do you remember that guy that you met that was staying in the cabin that was vacant?" And I said, "Yeah." And that's when he says, "He shot up your cabin." My jaw dropped. And right as he said that, my client's parents opened the house, and I looked at the child's dad and said, "Look, I gotta go. Someone just shot up my cabin. I don't know what's going on yet. I need to leave." I was so upset. As I'm walking back to the truck, I get on the phone and I call John.
And that was probably the worst call that I've ever received. Can't even describe the feeling that comes across you being the victim of a hate crime. Just knowing it's something that you've worked so hard towards and put your dreams and all your efforts towards was taken away.
At that time, we didn't know how bad the damage was. So I had my friend who I bought the property from call the police and have the police call me. And the sheriff called me and said he was going to head out there and see what he could see. It was in the middle of a blizzard. It was nighttime. There's no lights up there at night. He couldn't really see anything. And the blizzard was getting bad, and nobody was at the cabin in question from where the guy stayed who shot up our building. So he went home and went back out the next day when things were a little more clear. And he went to question the guy who supposedly shot up our cabin, and the guy opened up the door and let the police officer into the building, and sitting right there is the same shotgun that was described to us that he had used to shoot up our cabin. Well, right there you would think that's grounds for the police officer to arrest him, but he did, because as it turns out, the guy was he had prior convicted felon and was in possession of a firearm, so the police officer arrested him on that because he shouldn't have been in the same building with a gun, let alone have possession of one. So fast forward, and we're working up to the point to where I'm getting ready to try to come down there to meet with the sheriff. And we're waiting, more snow came, and finally we get a chance to go down there and meet with the sheriff and allow him to come in, take pictures, collect evidence. But prior to that, I sent my friend who I bought the property from down there to take photographs of all the damage. And when I saw the pictures, I immediately could tell by the shotgun holes in the side of the house that he had used birdshot. And there was a 90% chance the wax wedges were still inside the building because there was entrance holes but no exit. Because, you know, birdshot, such a weak load, punched through the wood, but then it just scattered on the inside, so there was nowhere for that wax wedge to go. And it wasn't like he was able to retrieve it because it was inside a locked building. So I called the sheriff up and said that we wanted to definitely meet him on site, and we drove down there, and the officer was there before we even got to the building.
Yeah, and he was a really nice guy. He was a lot more helpful than I pictured him being, especially with him knowing the situation with us being a gay couple and out in rural Missouri. Very supportive, nice, genuine guy. we started looking around on the inside, and as Charles predicted, of course, there were 3 or 4 wax wedges from the shells laying inside the house, along with all the BBs all over the floor and everything. It was a pretty complete mess. We knew we had proof. We knew we had links to this guy up at the other cabin to prove that he had done this. But I also went looking around on the outside, sifting under the top layer of the snow that had just fallen, and found, what, 3 or 4 shells laying around the outside that they didn't find to pick up.
So, the police officer, you know, I said to him, you know, I'd like to think this wasn't like some kind of hate crime. And he said, oh no, it was. And I'm like, huh? He's like, in booking, the guy was covered in swastika tattoos. He's a pretty self-proclaimed neo-Nazi. There's no doubt this was a hate crime. He was trying to send you guys a message. And that was terrifying. Well, he had gotten released, and I guess that he didn't know at the time that we had the police had found shells. The police were leaning into his girlfriend, and she ended up going down to the police station and filing her own separate charges against the guy, and they arrested him again. And while he was in jail that time, the police met her at their house, and apparently he had instructed her to pick up all the shells off our property and clear the scene so that way the police wouldn't find anything. Well, she found a few shells, and she gave the shells to the police officer, and the police officer pretty much indicated that the model and make of the shells was the same ammunition that was in the gun at the point in time they arrested him. So we pretty much knew this guy was he was going to get put away. There was pretty much no way. So we fast forward a couple months, and the court cases keeps getting put off and put off and put off. The guy is charged with like 6 or 7 felonies between what happened to us and his other domestic disputes. And so sitting with the prosecuting attorney when I drove back down, and mind you, I've missed several amounts of work over this. We already don't make a lot of money. This dream that we wanted to embark on was basically become a nightmare. And all our friends and family were like, you should just sell the property. You guys shouldn't have any business being down there. We had just got legally married. And, you know, we weren't about to let some neo-Nazi run us off.
No. I mean, if we would give up because of something like that happens, you know, I might as well not stand for my marriage. I might as well be in the closet and tell people I'm straight and that, you know, none of it's reality. So for us, it wasn't an option to back down. We had to carry through, and we had to push through with the project, and it was probably even more important now than it ever was.
I mean, a year later, and we still don't have all the damage repaired. We tried opening up a GoFundMe account, but I guess it's people are more supportive if they won't bake you a wedding cake,
right,
rather than, you know, 2 people in Missouri who just wanted to have a cabin in the woods. And you know, I view it as the guy tried to kill us because we were supposed to be there.
I think that's the one question that went through my mind the most when this was going on. You know, was he being a douchebag and just shooting up and destroying our property because he didn't like us? Or would he have done the same thing if he knew we were inside? Did he know if we were inside the cabin?
Because, like I said, we couldn't make it up the mountain because of the snow that weekend. And, you know, apparently when I did the math on the timeline, he did the shooting when we were supposed to be there. We were going to be there. It was, you know, an act of God that our truck could not make, that we had the bed overloaded with material and we couldn't get up the hill and kept sliding back down. So anyway, so I'm sitting with the prosecuting attorney, and he's, you know, saying, you guys got a really solid case, plus with everything, you know, on him, you know, he'll probably go away for a while. There's a possibility they might make him serve his sentences where it's like he gets a 4-year sentence, a 5-year sentence, and a 7-year sentence, and he gets to serve them all at the same time. Yeah, I don't understand that, but okay. And then the prosecuting attorney said, and I doubt that I'm going to push the fact that this was a hate crime. And I said, excuse me? And he goes, even though that is also a felony, it could potentially hurt your case. And I couldn't believe that I was sitting in a judicial system after just having my house shot up. I mean, there were 4 shotgun holes in my house, 2 windows shot out. If we would have been there, we would have been killed. And this guy's telling me they can't prosecute it as a hate crime because it will hurt the case because of the location and municipality that it's in. But that didn't stop us. We continue to, as we gain a little bit of money, fix some of the damage that was done, as well as finish building our dream, installing solar, putting up a Dickinson wood-burning stove, which we're still working on. Pretty much the last thing we need to really do to repair the damage is replace one of the windows. I have plexiglass bolted up on them. As you can see in one of our previous videos, I outlined how I temporarily fixed that just to keep the elements out of the cabin. But yeah, that's pretty much the story on why this Our Tiny Cabin project is so important to us, that not only is this our practice for when we decide to pare down everything we own and move into a tumbleweed,
which we will.
Which hopefully that's our 5-year goal, is to make enough money to get into a tumbleweed. And but this tiny cabin project was, learning how to do the solar, learning how to cohabitate in such a small space. Our tumbleweed, when we get one, will be bigger than our cabin. Like I said, with the loft, our cabin is 116 square feet, which means the initial floor plan is only about 97 square feet. So it's tiny, and we make it work. When we go out there, we have so much fun.
We do. It brings us closer together, I think that's how you can really tell if you're supposed to be with that person, if you can make it for a weekend in such a small space. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying there are challenges, and in our next video that we're going to post, I'm going to cover a couple products that we bought early in the game that really helped us to be able to stay out there extended periods of time and be off the grid before we were able to obtain solar panels on the roof, a generator for backup, and right now we have a little buddy heater that we use for heat, which is amazing, while we're working on finishing off the stack for the Dickinson wood stove. So look forward to that video coming up, as well as other videos that Jonathan and I may publish regarding some of our other adventures like kayaking and fly fishing and perhaps some other things we may have up our sleeve. So be sure to like this video
and subscribe. Also, we will be posting links below in the description, so make sure to read that. We've got a blog that's going up pretty well right now. It's Our Tiny Cabin Project.blogspot.com, and our Facebook page.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So make sure to like and subscribe. Share this video with your friends. Get it around, because your subscribership, your views, your comments, they mean everything to us, and it's what keeps the videos going on.
And let us know what you think. We'd be interested in hearing on how your opinion of the situation would have transpired if you would have been in the same circumstances, and what you may or may not have done differently. We'd love to hear that. Would you have stayed, or would you have sold off? Let us know. As always, this is Charles
and John
and Princess Frostbite saying, see you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.